Hey everybody, it's Tripl-L coming in to talk about My Hero Academia, Chapter 320. Do I have the title? I don't see the title right now, but hey, whatever guys. Hey, how are you doing? Anyway, this video is coming out on a Monday because I am not well, not feeling well at all. So we're gonna go through this chapter real quick. Don't have it in my notes just because I can't really sit down to do it. We'll go through the chapter. I do have my memory though, so hopefully we'll be able to cover everything. When it comes to chapter 320, this is covering the majority of the fight with Izuku. There are some observations that are worth taking into consideration, and we'll cover them in a bit. The big thing here is that we're seeing the kids make their plea for Izuku, but I think each person has something. There's two categories of what people are saying. So as we go through the chapter, I'll let you know what I'm thinking about it. Because what we're gonna, I think at the end of the day, we might be looking at the kids wanting to push for a compromise, but it's gonna be interesting to see how Izuku reacts to all this. And of course, we have excellent tunnel vision Izuku going on in here. Because of tunnel vision Izuku, we will be criticizing Izuku on a few points, just because there's the kid is, tunnel vision has its problems. Anyway, because I don't have the general notes, let's just jump into the page-by-page walkthrough, and I will let you know things as they come up. Anyway, I hope everyone is well. Let's jump into 320. So, the first page of 320. Now, this is an interesting page in that Ida is the one who comes in with principal focus. So, this is really interesting just in general of which characters are getting the principal focus for this situation, and the last chapter makes it look like it's Ochako, Bakugo, and Ida. When you look at these two chapters now, though, Ida and Bakugo are getting more screen time than Ochako. So what we really have to hope is that by the end of this, Ochako will have had equivalent screen time, right? Because Ida's a chapter opener. That's amazing. Again, like the big thing for Ochako here so far is that she's the one who just had the idea to go ambush Endeavor, whereas Ida acts as the representative of the class. And he's also the one that knows Izuku the most. Like, for instance, on that page, he's saying, once he set up his mind on something, he refuses to stop. I know that well, right? Ida knows that well, but the significance here is that it's Ida saying it. Ochako hasn't had anything like this just yet. Oh, you know what? I just remembered we had a cover page this week, and I remember I want to talk about the cover page. So let me go back and talk about the cover page first. So I think this was a beautiful cover page, and I liked that it looked like Suyu was crying and she was like wiping up her tears with her tongue, and that that connects to the final pages where she made reference to her crying. I think she looked really great here. Now there were some interpretations that saying that this chapter page was in reference to a natural disaster that occurred in Japan, but I'm not too sure personally. There's some stuff surrounding it, and also just the timeline of when this would have been created. I'm just not sure, but just keep that in mind that there was like some natural disaster in Japan involving, I think, a landslide. Anywho, for Tsuyu, I think this was a great shot, and even without the natural disaster, this fits with what we're seeing with Tsuyu at the end. Like, I think Tsuyu looked, I think she had a nice moment here, even though like her moment and Todoroki's are pretty much equivalent. Anyway, coming back to page 1. Page 1 has a few more details. Here we also have Bakugo saying that they heard that he unlocked the 4th and the 6th quirk. So if they heard that, it's like, who did they hear that from? It's either Endeavor or All Might. Given that All Might's car is seen at the chapter at the end, maybe. It might have been All Might gave the information to Nezu and then they passed it over to the kids. But honestly, if that's the case, like, I just want to remind you guys of the stuff that's happened between All Might and Izuku's mom about protecting Izuku. I think it's important to remember that All Might is not perfect. We know that he is not perfect. Night Eye is the ultimate conclusion of the idea that All Might is not perfect because he did something incorrect, that being he did not have the strength to go talk to Night Eye. In this situation, you have another instance where the adult All Might is failing the student. And, you can make the excuse, but, they didn't know that Izuku would get out of control. I don't care. He's 50 years old. He's the guy that made the promise to Inko. There has to be ramifications. And you know what? That's fine, because the story's probably going to do it, because the story has had All Might bow down before Inko before an apology. This is going to be if All Might lives, this is going to end in another All Might apology tour, because he's failed Izuku. He should have done better. Like, Bakugo pointed it out too. Like, these guys are just really bad for each other. This moment, really, for someone like Bakugo, he really needed All Might to be able to stop Izuku. But All Might couldn't. Even, and you know, again, we're now talking about the area of character flaw. Everything that's happening here is very much intentional. When it comes to All Might, he's screwed up as a teacher. Even the idea that UA will look after your students, All Might is a UA faculty. No matter how you look at this rhetoric, the only way you can absolve All Might of anything is if you take him to be an extreme victim. But no, he's a 50-year-old man. At some point, you have to be ready to criticize All Might, because All Might's going to criticize All Might. And this is one of the important things to keep in mind here when we're going into these chapters. And again, there's nuance. There's a lot of nuance here. But All Might isn't a child. You have to get ready to criticize people for their shortcomings when they pop up. And again, if All Might survives, we'll probably see another apology tour. And again, this whole thing is predicated on the idea that All Might had character defects that were ultimately going to embolden Izuku's character defects. So what do I want to say with this whole little segment here about All Might that I went on a tangent about? Well, just flat out, be ready to see some All Might criticism, and be ready to criticize All Might if you want. The guy has failed before. This could be seen as one of his greatest failings. Yeah, he went into a situation that he didn't know what was going to happen with Izuku, but at the end of the day, he was still responsible for the kid. And this is to another bigger point about just in general how the heroes are, you know, taking the backseat to the kids here. And, you know, over the live streams we did talk about it, but at the end of the day, My Hero Academia is a teenage empowerment manga. The teenagers have to come back into it and show that kids are cool. And what we're seeing here is just how every other character needs to be devalued, or not devalued. I think, like, in terms of Shonen Jump, Hero Academia probably handles it the best. Like other series will assassinate a character to make them seem really stupid to make someone else rise. But Hero Academia isn't doing it so bad. Like what you can see here, you can still kind of justify it as, well, you know, so much stress is going on. These people are just beaten down. They're tired. Maybe they're not thinking clearly. There's actually a lot of ways that Hero Academia gives you the justification. But overall, this is a time period where the adults will most likely be criticized. And again, Bakugo is the one that frames it. This is a nuanced situation where it's just unfortunate the way that things went out. Now, coming back to this, of course, what sprang that point of discussion out was just how exactly they found out the 4th and 6th. We have to assume someone's giving information. I would say, you know, be prepared for the idea that maybe All Might passed information to Netsu, because at the end of the day, he's still responsible. He should still be looking out for Izuku's best interest, and helping out the kids might be his way of doing that, although that will be the statement that he can't do anything about the situation. Now, I also love that Bakugo pointed out that Izuku has a different art style. I think that was hilarious. We go into page 4. And this is Izuku thanking everyone for coming for him. And we see Izuku here. He's choosing to go with Smokescreen. And we saw later that he was trying to run away. So this was just... before this chapter came out, a lot of people were kind of wondering if Izuku was just going to beat up people. But no, he's going for the full runaway. We might see that change next chapter. Like, Izuku might decide to get a little bit serious. Or he might just freak out a little bit. But for this chapter, he's on the pure defensive. Now, on this page, what I want to point out, because we're seeing it here, is Aoyama. So there's a bunch of characters that have yet to pop up for the chapter, or for this fight officially. So next chapter, we should be expecting to see Aoyama's rhetoric, which he should have a lot. I really hope he brings up the cheese. We have Toru's rhetoric, we have Mina's rhetoric, we have Kirishima's rhetoric, and then we have the big ones of Bakugo, Ida, and Ochako. Now, mind you, Bakugo's been getting a lot, but he's probably going to get more. Those last 3 are going to be the ones that we have to really watch. Although I would think that Shoto and Tsuyu will get more as well. But when we're looking at things here, there are still missing people. Mineta is also another missing quantity. And that one's interesting because Mineta could stop Izuku if he's very clever with how he sticks the balls on Izuku. For instance, if Bakugo has a ball stuck on his palm and he sticks that to Izuku, that's it. Izuku has to go with Bakugo. Or sorry, Bakugo has to go with Izuku. Either or. But yeah, that page, other points of value was that Ochako knew that was the 6th user's power, which is just saying that Bakugo spread the information around and told everyone at the very least. Page 5 is Landmine Blast, which tells us that Bakugo is now able to blow away smoke with a shockwave. That's pretty cool. I did like Bakugo's rhetoric about how Izuku's just seeing everyone as a bunch of NPCs. And he's right. Like, this is going to be a big issue. Izuku is not acknowledging these people are also heroes. And we'll get into that there. But Izuku is seeing his friends in a very strange way. Next we go into page 6, which I think was a very loud page for a very quiet character. On that page we see Koda using the birds to knock Izuku into the air or something like that. So now we begin looking at what these people are saying. Koda, first, I will say, he takes off his mask and he yells at Izuku. Koda doesn't yell. Koda's a very quiet character. He's a very timid character. What the author is saying when you see that is like, whoa, look at that. This kid that's always quiet, he's yelling out for a friend, right? That's the intention behind the message or behind the picture here. Anyway, when we look at his message, he's saying, yo, the principal is going to welcome you back to school. Interesting methodology. But he's saying, okay, come back to school with us, right? We move on. We see Izuku use Black Whip to get away, and then we see Sero come in, and now Sero's spot is really cool. So Sero grabs Izuku's hand, and he also grabs to a Black Whip. Now, Black Whip ultimately can interact with mass, so Black Whip must be solid to some degree. It's the same way that Dark Shadow probably works in terms of hard energy. But one thing to keep in mind here is Sero has a natural limit, that being Sero can only grab 2 things at once. If Izuku really wanted to, he probably could have snapped the first tape and then have had Black Whip do something again. But this is probably one of those spots where you're seeing that Izuku's reaction time is going to be the problem. Izuku just probably can't handle too many operations. I mean, he works on parallel processes. He probably can't do too much right now. So this is one of those moments I do think hardcore. The kids are being helped by the fact that Izuku's tired. Now with Sero, we see like some of the style that Horikoshi is going to pull off for the chapter, that being that he has Izuku thinking about the people that he's actually talked to. If you notice with Koda, Izuku doesn't really have any moment that he refers to, and that's ultimately because Koda did not get enough time. Now this leads me to another topic that I would like to cover, and that is generally the idea about what this type of thing would usually do in another story. This is now in broad strokes, this is we gotta appeal to the hero and remind him of the good times moment. It happens in a lot of anime. A lot of times something's going on with the main character and everyone else is coming now and they'll be like, yo, remember that time that you did this, and this? Yo, remember what you did this for me? And what this moment in general is supposed to do in a story is that it serves as the ultimate payoff for looking at side characters. In other stories, and this happens more with light novels will sometimes have a principal character for the book or a principal side character for the book. And you go through the process, you go through 18 novels, you've met so many different characters, then at the finale or at a big climax, those characters come back and suddenly all those years, all those months that you spent with them, every time that you took the time to read their little story, it all comes rushing back and you get to have that wonderful payoff where everyone says, hey, our time in the story mattered. Now, unfortunately, and also very masterfully, Horikoshi can't do that because in Hero Academia there is a severe issue with screen time, and in Hero Academia you're in a situation where Horikoshi will tell people like, hey, Shinzo's gonna have his moment, just give me time, or Shoji's gonna have his moment, don't worry, Shoji's still working hard. The poor guy, he's trying to get everything he wants in there, but he's dealing with the needs of the character versus the need of the story, and that's causing a big issue. Now Horikoshi is very intelligent here because for the characters that don't have a lot to actually share with Izuku, he knows they don't, so he switches the rhetoric a little bit, and he already, as far as I'm concerned, on a technical level, he already justified the situation the moment that he had people like Koda and Hagakure saying like, yeah, we do not have critical moments with Izuku, but we still care about him, we live under the same house, right? The moment he said that, he was saying, guys, I know that these people do not know Izuku well enough, but just believe me, they like him. Nothing wrong with that. That is completely feasible. It's been a year. There's no problem with that. But it is interesting to see that this moment ultimately is has to be correctly presented because there is a very fundamental asymmetry between the characters occurring here. There's characters like Koda who have done nothing, and there's characters like Sero who had a little thing that Izuku could have a flashback towards. It's an appreciation here. While Horikoshi did not have the resources or the time to be able to pull this off in the fashion that light novels can pull it off and other stories can pull off, you have to appreciate that he knew what he was getting into this particular situation. I still think the awareness of it is what elevates this as a good piece of writing. Anyway, continuing with the Sero stuff, Izuku is able to get rid of Seiro's tape. We see it happen in this panel, and then we have Jiro coming in with her heartbeat wall. Now, I'm not too sure what happens here. When I see heartbeat wall, it looks to me like it's a wall, so Izuku probably... So what I think happened here is that Jiro was cutting off Izuku's way of escapes, and she was forcing him to go in a particular direction, because she makes the comment that he's fast. That wouldn't have happened if she said... Or that wouldn't have happened if she was the one that blasted him away. So I assume Izuku did that himself. So she is a... this is important. She was a battlefield manipulator. Now, on this one, Jiro talks about that one time during her arc where it's like, yeah, you know, I didn't think this was the best. I didn't think that was a big... I don't know if you thought that was a big deal, but it was a big deal for me. And someone on the live stream made a really good comment that it's interesting how some people think that Izuku doesn't care too much about them. But that might be also reflective of what the author thinks people care about when it comes to Hero Academia. I mean, like, from the author's perspective, when you have everyone saying that joint training is boring, and it's really just the biggest display of character exposition and character development. No. Character exposition, minor character development. When you have, like, a slice of life thing like that, yeah, you could probably see why the author would think that maybe the majority of people don't like the little things, like a small moment like Jiro being helped out. So that might be a little bit of a reflection on the author there. And again, when you look at the criticisms of this current season, you can understand it. The guy probably is aware of it. Now, with Jiro, it's worth pointing out that Tokoyami was doing a lot. He positioned her in place. What's interesting here is Tokoyami probably has the most impact in the chapter. That makes sense though. Like, Tokoyami is a big player, and he has one of the most versatile quirks in this sense. It was just really interesting to see how that worked here. Anyway, we have Jiro's moment. Izuku gets pushed away, and then we go into Ojiro having Tornado Tail Dance. And he, I think at this moment, is still also trying to manipulate Izuku to go towards that particular building. So here, Ojiro talks back about the Shinzo stuff. And Ojiro, he comes in with some interesting rhetoric. He's saying that, yo, we can't let you be the only one to do this. So at first you have Koda talking about going back to school. Here's where you get the second rhetoric of, hey, we'll go with you. So really, we shouldn't... What you're doing here is that the author is setting up two possible alternatives. There's return to school, or there's go off with Izuku. Now, mind you, I think from the perspective of the characters, I think it's most safe to say that the characters are probably thinking that they can do a situation of, hey, Izuku, let's be rational. Let's take a break at UA. UA is safe. You can rest there, and then when you want to go out again, we will all go with you. I think that is the most rational thing, because then you get to satisfy the people who say, let's go back to UA, and you get to satisfy the people that are saying, hey, we are going to do this with you. Really, the rational thing is to have a base that you return to, or in general, no, that doesn't have to be UA. It can be any base. Have a base, rest, and continue, right? Because what we wanted to prevent is Izuku burning out, because this is the thing that the other pro heroes have pointed out. But anyway, keep in mind, it is actually very interesting that there were different rhetorics. And to very quickly touch on Jiro, like, there is another rhetoric that's coming up here, and that's specifically the way that some characters are saying things to Izuku. Like with Jiro's situation, she's talking about the good times, and this one I think might actually be a little bit dangerous. It's one thing to tell Izuku to go back to the school, and it's another thing to tell Izuku to let them go with him. But to remind him of the good times, it's like, that might provoke Izuku into thinking, yeah, that was a really good time. Or like, yeah, I care about you guys. I don't want you hurt. That might make him double down, because they're just reminding him of everything he doesn't want to lose. But we'll have to see how Izuku's going to internalize that in the next chapter. And sorry, I'm all over the place, guys, but this is unfortunately what's happening here. Page 10. Now, on page 10 is where you have Izuku just flat out telling the kids stuff. And on page 10, we also see Tokoyami come back in to do his stuff. So on page 10, Izuku goes in saying, I can't let All For One take you from me. That's why I had to leave. And again, this is one of those situations where you see the naivety of Izuku on full blast. Izuku, is it impossible for All For One to attack the school when you're not there? It is naive to think that All For One wouldn't attack someone when they're out and about, right? But at the same time, All For One, like, I don't even know how to justify at this point. Let's just say All For One is big brained, right? Like, he's so big brained. The only reason Izuku has gotten away with this so far with this line of thinking is that All For One hasn't called him out on it. All For One hasn't said, like, okay, you know what, I'm gonna attack your mom. You know, All For One's not doing that. Why? Because All For One probably likes seeing Izuku suffer. He probably likes seeing Izuku go crazy as Izuku tries to find him. He's thinking like, yeah, Izuku, I've been alive for over 100 years. I can wait out a teenager. Actually, yeah, he could wait out a teenager. But this line of thought is very egocentric because Izuku thinks the entire situation revolves around him. And you know what? Maybe All For One wants him to think that the entire situation revolves around him. But this is pretty stupid. This logic has been stupid the entire time. You can appreciate that he doesn't want All For One to kill people, but this guy is blind to the fact that these people put themselves in danger every single day. At this rate, I'm surprised Izuku's not saying, I'm going to take out every single villain in the world, because I don't want them to ever threaten any of you. Right, mind you, like, All For One, it's a little bit different because he's pointed Izuku out, but like, this rhetoric, if you blow it up, you can break it. It's not a good rhetoric, but again, Izuku's got tunnel vision. Everyone sees it. Anyway, we go into Tokoyami's portion where they push Izuku into the building, and here we also see Sugar Man come out, and he's catching the people that fell. So Sugar Man at this point is acting like battlefield support. He also has his quip about Izuku saying that, hey, I'm not giving you Aries food coloring. And this is again one of the big reminders that the author really was doing his best to try and get some people to talk about something worthwhile in relation to Izuku. Honestly, food dye, I personally don't care. That's so small. But you understand, right? The author did want to bring up as many moments as he could. Now, what I found really interesting as well is for Sato, he mentioned Koda. And it's just funny that the two most underrepresented characters in the class, it's funny that Sato referenced his contemporary. I just found that so funny. Anyway, Sato is pushing back towards the school. Now, we go into the building, and this is really interesting on page 12. On page 12, you see Izuku is against that block, right? And Momo is there. What's interesting about this is that Momo was at the ground level before this fight started. So, in the span of a few minutes, because it couldn't have been that long, Momo was taken up to the building along with Kaminari. Like, they went through many stairs, or they scaled the building and they were in there. The fact that the block was there before everything went down, it tells me, and mind you, like, Momo might have added some stuff onto it, but given the positioning, they probably were trying to get Izuku into this building from the get-go. So it just seems to me like they might have prepared this in the background. But again, it's very hard to tell what's actually going on here. It's hard to tell how this worked. It all, like, we'll have to see how the anime does it just to get the sense of the speed. But regardless, I think given that Momo went into that building and was there ready to go, and given that, you know, they shot him there specifically, I feel like they had a pretty good plan here. If there's one thing that this page says, is that these kids planned for where they were going to have Izuku go. Because there's no way that Momo's going to be waiting on the 4th floor. Izuku gets thrown into the 8th and she rushes up like 4 flights of stairs just to get to the 8th floor with how quickly she does it. Like, in the time that Izuku finishes responding to Sato, Momo comes in. Yeah, no, she had to have been there from the beginning. So props for the kids for coordinating this well. Anyway, on Momo, she mentions that, yeah, we wanted to go with you at first. And then she mentions that she's been authorized to use her quirk and aid Endeavor and the other heroes. And when I saw the authorization, I was just thinking, like, yeah, the same way that she was authorized to go out with a militia, pretty much, and act without any hero nearby that we can see. The fact that she was authorized to do that, yeah, would I be insane to think that Izuku was also authorized to do that, to use his quirk in the early stages? I must be insane. Anyway, I'm being facetious. You guys know what I'm referring to. It's just the idea that Izuku's a vigilante, right? Like, this is, again, another one of those lines. This is the reality. My Hero Academia has a lot of bureaucracy in the background, and a simple line like that, yeah. Izuku was authorized to use his quirk at the beginning of this. He was likely not a vigilante. He is probably now a vigilante, technically, because they don't want him doing this. So authorization revoked. They've told him that Nezu is welcoming him back. He knows If Izuku gets away from this, he's going to break that phone and he's going to go rogue. That's probably where you're going to see like full-on vigilante, technically. But yeah, no, I just liked it. Sometimes you need characters to say it out loud how the boring parts of their universe works, but I'm ultimately very happy for it. Anyway, we have a machine to put Izuku to sleep. I thought that was really interesting. Really interesting that they just didn't use they didn't throw in some sleep gas in there as well. With Dark Shadow binding Izuku, I think I would have had the machine work if I still want the machine to work. I would have maybe thrown a gas canister as well. And I would have been wearing a gas mask maybe. Like just there, if you're gonna try and put him to sleep, there's nothing wrong with just flooding that entire building with sleeping gas. Just give some gas masks out and I think you'll be quite fine. It's just because like with this, there were too many moving parts in this particular situation. Anyway, we're going to page 13 and we have Kaminari sneaking up on Momo from behind and then grabbing Izuku. Now this was really interesting just because he ended up talking about bathing, but whatever. When it comes to Kaminari, Kaminari is again another one of the authors saying like, hey guys, I'm aware that you have not seen that many moments between these characters, right? And that line comes in, me and you, we ain't got a ton in common, but you're still a friend. Even if we gotta force this friendship down your throat. Yeah, no, that's totally fine. Again, the author knows where these moments are the weakest. And that's why he's gotta play justification game. And again, you know, we did have a portion of the fan base that was complaining that these people weren't Izuku's friend. So the author had a good sense here, because if you don't have them saying these moments, it's going to get infuriating with people saying that they're not really friends. Now we go into page 14 where we have Shoji coming in, right? And Shoji is using insulating tape that Momo made for Shoji's tentacles. Now the reason that this came up most likely is because Kaminari is going to be shocking Izuku and they want to make sure that electricity doesn't come out. Now Shoji references the time during the training camp, and you know, he calls it a lineup that might even scare All Might, and I'm just thinking, that's a lineup that failed, Shoji. That's a failure. You're a failure. You should have been keeping eyes out behind you. Who would have thought that the guy that can produce multiple eyes should have been looking behind him as they were walking? Nah, man. So, you know, it's a nice little moment, but for me, I just remember failure. Anyway, here we have Tokoyami coming back in again, and he has something interesting where Dark Shadow's been in the darkness for a while, and only when Tokoyami says indulge in the darkness does Ragnarok actually come out. So that was really interesting. This was definitely a chapter of Tokoyami doing his best here. Anyway, Tokoyami references the idea that Izuku was the guy that gave him the idea for defensive Dark Shadow. That's another one of those reference the moment, reference the good times. Shoji then goes in, and I think Shoji, this line is actually really good from him. Do you see us more as victims who need protection and coddling? Yes, that's exactly it. That's exactly what Izuku sees them as. Like, someone tell him, they're heroes. They're heroes in training. They go out. They get involved in danger. The world's a dangerous place. They're the only ones standing between it and danger. Yeah, no, that was a great line. I really actually wish we could have seen Izuku talking about that, man. Anyway, this is where we have Kaminari just pointing out that Izuku needs to go take a bath. I agree. We then go into page 16, which is really just a power demonstration thing as Izuku runs away. I do think that Kaminari wasn't on him at that point. Anyway, Tokoyami points out that Ragnarok was ripped apart, and we see a little bit of the bindings there. And then we go into page 17, which I think is the most interesting thing in the world. Izuku says that because they're so worried about him, there's no real danger or malice here. And he says that that's why Danger Sense isn't working. Now, man, I love powers. You guys know I love powers. When this happened on the live stream, we talked about it. We tried to understand what was going on here. And you know, I'm not going to try and break this one. Danger Sense, well, no, I'm going to try to break it. But I'm only going to do it in the sense of like showing you where the problems are. But I don't care. Danger Sense is a dumb power in terms of balancing it out, because Danger Sense breaks the game. And Danger Sense is so fuzzy in how it works because the author needs it to be fuzzy, because Danger Sense will ruin the surprise element when it actually matters. And in this case, there is something that's happening with Danger Sense that the author is doing. But first, let's cover the breakdown. What I want you to know is that I think it doesn't matter anymore. Whatever the author says goes, even if he's wrong. Whatever he says goes. I think you're all very intelligent. I think you can come up with all the excuses in the world and to justify as to how Danger Sense works. I think I could too. Like, at the end of the day, when it came to the live stream, we were just thinking like, Danger Sense just probably takes in a lot of different factors at different weights, and it just kind of adds them all together, and that's the ultimate result. Now, when it comes to this chapter, what do we learn about Danger Sense? Danger Sense judges intent. That's what Danger Sense does. The author pretty much said intention matters for Danger Sense to work. Really risky. If it ever comes that Danger Sense triggers when, for instance, a random piece of debris dislodges itself from a building because of a nice breeze and it falls on Izuku. If Izuku reacts to that debris and Danger Sense goes off, the idea that Danger Sense is dependent on intention would break. Because what you would be saying in the case of random debris is like, okay, Danger Sense didn't work here because there was no malice or danger. There was no real malice or danger in the situation. But it worked when a random falling debris with no malice came close to Izuku's head. Now, mind you, that brings us to the next layer here, that being danger. It's quantifying danger, real danger. And now I'm going to just show you this image because this is the one that's causing the issue. This moment with Hikage and Banjo. So there's no real danger or malice here. Here's where the problems begin. Once you start playing this game of what people are thinking, let's look at this situation here at Banjo. So, Banjo comes in. He's going in for a nice little swing. He knows Hikage. They're probably friends. He was probably going to wrap his hand around Hikage. And Hikage triggers Danger Sense. Alright, so there's no real danger or malice here. What happened here? Are you saying that there was malice in him coming around and just having a playful rib? Bakugo's been going off here yelling all kinds of things at Izuku. So are we saying that that playful thing, there was malice behind it? Are we saying that these two guys, ghosts, are like there's bad intention between them and it's not a playful, just a playful jab? So how sensitive is Danger Sense to malice? And other people pointed out, like, well, maybe Shinomori, maybe it's the perception of the user. Maybe the perception of the user influences how Danger Sense works. Well, okay, so the justification being Shinomori probably doesn't like touching people, so you have to make that assumption there, and then you're thinking that's why Danger Sense perceives Banjo as dangerous. Well, when you look back at Izuku, well, Izuku most certainly doesn't like this, so if it relies on the person's perception to change the sensitivity as to how Danger Sense detects malice, Danger Sense would be going off. So when you see Izuku here, when he's so desperate and he really needs Danger Sense to work and it's not working, can you really say that Danger Sense is dependent on the person's perception? Well, maybe you could. Maybe you could say, oh yeah, like it's like minorly dependent. Fair enough. I think that's fair. If we're talking about real danger, okay, there's no real danger. So when we look at Banjo and Hikage and the triggering of Danger Sense in this panel, I don't think you can say there was real danger at a guy trying to like wrap his arm around his buddy. I don't think you can say there's any danger in that. At best, you can say that there was malice. Okay, we move into this next one. Alright, so at this point, Danger Sense is triggering multiple times as Black Whip is trying to ensnare Hikage. And what you see here, now at this point you gotta say, well, okay, if we assume that there is malice in the first place, Danger Sense works, that's fine. But wait, what if there is no malice? Then what are we seeing here? Like, if you say that no, there could be no malice in the first panel, when you go into that second panel, well, Danger Sense is, like, he's probably just trying to grab Hikage. Like, is that real danger? And this is where the problems ultimately come, right? What you have here are these scenes were designed to do two very different things. And now, to make Danger Sense make sense, you have to make fundamental assumptions about the previous moments in order to make it work. What you have here is that in the Hikage scene, Danger Sense was being used to show off what Danger Sense could do. The biggest sin of that moment is saying that there was danger in a guy, a hot-blooded guy like Banjo, coming in and just, you know, being physically affectionate. That's the sin of that particular page. It suggested that Danger Sense was very sensitive to anything. When you look at page 17, what this chapter is trying to do is that Danger Sense has now become a plot device to say, like, these people care about Izuku. So one page is just to show off Danger Sense. The other page is to make a point about Danger Sense. That's where the conflict is ultimately come, or like that's not conflict. That's where the weirdness comes out. They had very different intentions. The author saw this and he's like, this is the best way to say without a doubt that these people care about Izuku, because powers are really easy to understand. So, interesting situation. As we go forward into the future, you know, Danger Sense, I think, is going to bend according to what the story needs at a particular moment in time. And I don't envy the author on this one. I would like to know what you guys think about it down below. At the end of the day, I'm going to go along with it. I think there's many ways to justify it. If you just give in a bunch of factors and you say that the factors are weighted differently, I think you're going to be just fine with it. It's just, this was ultimately a very interesting situation. And if there's anything to take away there, I guess take away like the narrative value. Danger Sense here acted as the ultimate proof of the care that these people had for Izuku. Let's see if the author breaks it in the future. Actually, he likely will. Look for any comedy moments in the future, because those are probably the moments that are going to break this little thing, because usually it's in the comedy that the author breaks some of his logic. On page 18, we have Heaven Piercing Ice Wall. I just want to point out this part. Izuku went through this wall, man. It's hilarious. But then we have Shoto coming in there and talking about, like, yo, Izuku, like, you can cry. And he ultimately is saying, like, this is a burden that you should share with the rest of us. So he's one of the people that is suggesting that they'll go along with Izuku. Mind you, probably going in for a compromise here. But it was very lovely. And then we have Tsuyu. Now, Tsuyu, like, she looks really cool here. I like that she references the time that she was crying, because that was one of her big moments where she kind of failed the class because she didn't know what this class was capable of. And she also, her dialogue is interesting, just because, like, her dialogue might show how much she's unaware of the situation. And this is actually just an interesting discussion point. It's not criticizing the chapter. It's only talking about just the significance of the things going on. First off, I will point out Tsuyu is doing nothing in this battle. She's just watching Izuku from afar. Moving on from there, I will say, moving on from there, we'll look at her exact dialogue. She says, if you're dead set on becoming some comic book superhero, then Class A won't let you live that fantasy alone. Now, there's many things that you can talk about when it comes to that particular situation. First off, appreciate that Tsuyu is one of the people that's saying, we will help you, Izuku. Appreciated. That's pretty awesome, Tsuyu. But the issue is when you talk about it a fantasy. Now, when she talks about comic book superhero, you get it. They're talking about the comic book superhero that stands at the most ideal comic book superhero. The one that even Stain wants. The true hero. The hero that doesn't have negative personality traits. The true hero that doesn't feel the stress. That doesn't get PTSD. That doesn't get anxiety. That doesn't worry. The hero that only exists in the most idealistic of comic book pages. That's the one she's talking about. The hero that goes out there and doesn't cry and just does what needs to be done. It's an interesting thing. You understand what she's talking about. She's saying that you want to be this unrealistic thing in this world, in Hero Academia. That's not how things work. People actually have significant problems, mental health. There's a lot of issues going on. But the interesting thing occurs with what happens when you have a villain who chases a fictional ideal. All For One wants to be a demon king, and he has the power to bring it. So when you have one character elevating the world level and making it more like a fantasy where you need a hero like the comic book heroes to come in, what happens? Because she's calling this a fantasy. All For One, he's making his fantasy a reality, and that fantasy has produced a lot of dead bodies. Nana's dead. Shigaraki was turned into a living weapon. The Nomu are quite literally undead creatures brought back to life. Central Hospital is able to revive a man after fake killing him. You live in a world of fantasy already. You know, what happens when a villain is pretty much telling a hero, you better live up to the fictional ideal? Or, you know, the fictional ideal might be the thing that you need to embrace here if you want to actually take down the fictional supervillain. Ultimately, I think it's a very interesting discussion. And what I'm ultimately wondering is that when you call this a fantasy, Izuku's suffering a lot. This fantasy that Izuku's pursuing is built on the backs of his anxieties and worries. Will Izuku have a bad reaction to that being called a fantasy? Because of this fantasy, All Might lost his teacher. All Might ended up with a hole in his gut. This fantasy that's currently happening is because there's a very real supervillain on the horizon who can bring back dead people and make monsters the world's never seen. This is a very interesting situation. Now, everything here in this chapter really relies on Izuku's follow through in the next chapter. I want to know what Izuku's going to say about this particular situation. So far, he's doubling down on what he believes, but I want to see him like really engage with the rhetoric. I want to see, you know, even just a little bit of Izuku saying, or just more retorts. I want to see more retorts from Izuku, more significant ones, like to the really good questions. And for the next chapter, you know, if Izuku has a reaction to the fantasy line, and he thinks about it from the perspective of, you're calling this a fantasy when people have died, then I would love to see Izuku try and call Tsuyu out here. Mind you, Tsuyu is still looking at this from the point of a realist. Like, she's looking at this from the point of like someone who suffers the negative side effects of the choices they make. But at the same time, like, this is just like the big example that Tsuyu isn't aware of what All For One represents. And I mean, remember, All For One is a guy that lives in legends. All For One is a guy that All Might bumps up as being the Demon King or the Dark King of the, early Hero Academia world. The man's got a legacy. And Tsuyu is completely blind to it. So next chapter, what am I ultimately hoping for? Well, I think Izuku might still get away. But we have so many good rhetorics here. Like, no matter which direction the author goes, I think I could justify every direction unless he does something really weird. But yeah, you can have Izuku being taken back to school. The characters now have enough rhetoric here that I could say, like, yeah, I could actually believe someone's impassioned plea being able to change Izuku's mind. I can also believe Izuku is ultimately able to win because he's just desperate enough and he breaks the stuff and he goes off and secludes himself more. I think here you have everyone telling Izuku, hey, we want to work with you. And if Izuku says no to that, then that's going to be an ultimate failure for him. Because if something goes wrong and they have to come back and save him later on, everyone can be like, we told you so. Or, you know, he could tell himself, people are trying to help him the whole time. Like, you can actually if Izuku gets away, you have Izuku being able to reflect. If Izuku goes with his friends, you can have him like being able to come back around. Personally, I want Izuku to just go back to a safe place. All For One attack be damned. But the authors set things up here that we can see some great things. Now with the next chapter, we know we're guaranteed to get the rhetorics for the last couple of characters. The last thing now is just to see what Ida and Ochako are going to do. What is going to be their final play here? What's going to be their final thing? Ideally, Ochako doesn't do the girl thing of just hugging Izuku and giving him a kiss or something. Ideally, she attacks him just like everyone else has, using rhetoric. Ideally, she comes in strong, but we'll have to see. Hopefully, this isn't the moment that the author talked about Ochako bringing in hope, because if this is the moment that Ochako brings in hope, that's going to be unfortunate because we still have a lot of pain ahead of us. But we'll have to see. Anyway, everyone, that's my thoughts for chapter 310 of Hero Academia. Let me know what you thought down below. Because this was kind of ad-lib, I might have missed a few things or I might have spoken incorrectly, but if you have any issues, let me know down below. And till next time, I hope you have an absolutely great day.